Hi everybody, this is your ordinary Jage signing back on. I have Steve here from LSAT Unplugged, the YouTube channel. And today I'm just gonna pick his brain with a bunch of questions in regards to the LSAT and the admissions process. And yeah, so let's just go ahead and get started. How are you today, Steve?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Good. No, thank you for joining us. Yeah, literally. So glad you reached out. I'm so excited to just hear your perspective about the test and everything, and just help us get through, please.
Yeah, totally. That's what I'm here for. So I'm just happy to help however I can.
Awesome. I appreciate it. All right. So first, just tell me a bit about your channel and just what you do and why you do it, and yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I've been coaching the LSAT for over 10 years now. I started off running the LSAT blog, which is a website devoted to everything related to LSAT prep and law school admissions, with over 1,000 articles, study schedules, cheat sheets, guides, explanations. I then expanded into YouTube and podcasting. So I have the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel at youtube.com/LSATblog. And then I have the LSAT Unplugged podcast available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and pretty much everywhere else. And so on those channels and on the podcast, I basically feature full-length recordings of classes I teach, whether they're in person here in New York City where I'm based, or I teach them online. I also have discussions like this with students like yourself. I also interview admission officers and law school prep folks, so pretty much everybody under the sun. And I also have shorter videos on specific topics as well.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much. We need every ounce of this. So yeah. So I also want to tell you a little bit about myself, my channel, and why I do what I do.
Yeah, please.
So yeah. I started my channel a few months ago, actually, not too long ago. And it was just kind of to just get a perspective on the law school admissions process, as well as, law school, but we're not there just yet, but the whole entire journey in total. And I just happened to be at this point, and this is kind of like a very crucial point in like every, aspiring law student, aspiring attorney's life. And I just wanted to get the ups and downs, the highs and lows, and every single, ounce that goes into the LSAT and preparing for law school. So here we are. But one thing that I wanted to start off with as well is I just released a video about my results for the LSAT, which I've taken twice, and so far. And the second time, I did not do much higher than my first. So basically, a great thing that I want to get out of this video is just how to increase your scores, because I thought I studied a lot better than I did last year, and I studied a lot longer as well. But yeah, I would just love some extra methods and tools to increase my score, because I'm definitely going to take it in June as well. But yeah, so one of the reasons where I want to start with is just one of the reasons why I think I did how I did. And I think I studied in a way where I kind of wanted to get familiar with everything rather than securing and practicing everything. So basically, first question is, how important is practice with each question type, and how much should you practice a certain type of question? Like, are some more important than others? You know what I mean?
That's a great question. I'd want to know more before giving a specific recommendation. Obviously, practice is important. You want to practice everything. Anything that you see on a previous LSAT administration could come up again on a future LSAT administration. The LSAT does repeat itself again and again. And so what I'd want to know more about is, what are your weak areas? Because those are, of course, what you're going to want to practice more. And then I'd also want to talk about the review process too. But why don't you tell me a little bit about what your specific weak areas are?
Sure, yeah. So just to be a little bit transparent about that, my weakest areas, I believe, were reading comprehension, and as well as strengthen with necessary premise. So those two just kind of rocked my world a little bit, and I could see myself working to try to find the correct answer, but in the end, it ended up taking too long. So I just had to guess. I read that you don't really have to read reading comprehension, the whole entire section, in order. You can flip back and forth and things like that. But in doing that, it just kind of made me nervous. And also, with the day of, I felt pretty confident going in, and then I got there, and it's just like, oh my God, like the pressure of it, as well as the pressure of the time. It was definitely something that just kind of like swept me off my feet. Like it was the timing of it all was also, because I feel like if I would have had more time, or the LSAT allowed more time, it would have been a little bit easier, just because the pressure would be off a little bit more. So yeah, those were definitely my weak areas.
Okay, so thanks for sharing those. I would say you mentioned a couple of particular logical reasoning question types. So one thing you might want to do is do those questions by type as a drill. Maybe do 30 of that type or 50 of that type. I have categorizations on my site for all logical reasoning questions and the other sections too, actually. But you can go through and see, okay, well, all the necessary assumption questions are these from exams in the 20s and 30s and so on. So it'll tell you test number, section number, question number. So you can kind of handpick them out of the actual official LSAT prep tests. You also mentioned reading comprehension as an area of struggle, I think, right? You mentioned reading comp and you talked about going in different orders. You can go in different orders. One thing you might want to do is do the passages with the greatest number of questions first. Like some might have 7, some might have only 6 or 5. So save the one with 5 for last, because the time you invest in reading the passage up front will give you a lot more bang for your buck. Gotcha. You also mentioned timing. Is timing an issue for all sections, or were the ones you mentioned in particular?
Ooh, yeah, so like just regular LR questions, it's fine. But then when we got to like games and reading comp, that's when it came into play, and it was just like, yeah, it kind of made me nervous, and then thinking too much and just overthinking it, over process, and then yeah. Then
okay, so I could talk about that. So for games, you want to get really fast at the easy games. You have an average of 8 minutes and 45 seconds per game, but not all games are of equal difficulty. So you might want to figure out certain game types that are easy, that you can get through even more quickly. So certain relative ordering games where things are all before and after each other, very loosely related. You could aim to do those maybe in 6 minutes, or games involving conditional statements where you link them together. Those might seem hard now, but they have appeared many times over the years. And if you practice them, you could potentially get those down to 6 minutes as well. Wow. And so I would say, look at the games that repeat, that are on the easier side, and just drill them, so that rather than spending 8:45 on them, that you can reduce your timing down to even 6 minutes. It is possible, believe it or not. It takes work, it takes time, but it is doable.
Yeah, so practice and everything. So that brings me to my next point of kind of studying, and just when to do that and how to do that. So pretty much, what would like a perfect study routine look like for you?
So a perfect study routine would ideally take place over 5 to 6 months. Most people only want to invest 2 to 3 months, but the LSAT is worth the investment. It is important enough. You think about it, you earn your undergraduate GPA over the course of 3 to 5 years, but the LSAT's more important, so it's certainly worth investing more than 2 to 3 months alone. So I would say 5 to 6 months, broken down to 3 phases, no matter what your timeline is. Phase 1 is accuracy, building the foundation first, working through questions untimed by type to learn the basics. Then you move on to pacing, which is individual timed 35-minute sections, getting used to that. And I can talk more about timing with reading comp, since we didn't fully cover that yet. I do want to mention that too. And then finally, endurance, which is doing full-length 5-section timed exams. In the lead up to test day, I'd recommend doing at least 10 of those to really simulate test day conditions, what test day will be like for you.
Gotcha.
So to speak about the reading comp timing, one thing I wanted to share a few strategies for you on that.
Please.
Since you mentioned it was an area of concern. You want to get your reading speed up. That's the biggest thing I could say. You can do things in all the different orders that you want to, but ultimately you have the 35 minutes. You want to get to as many questions as possible and get them right. So there are a couple of tools I want to mention for you. One of them is a site called phrasereader.com. You can basically copy paste text into a little field, and it'll display it for you at different speeds. So maybe right now you're good at reading like 200 words per minute or 300 words per minute. But for the LSAT, if you could get it up to 400 words per minute and double the time the speed at which you can read, you could take, rather than taking 4 minutes to read the passage, you could take 2 minutes to read the passage, and then take those 2 minutes and apply them to the questions. So drilling yourself to get your reading speed up, getting it faster. Of course, we're not used to reading this sort of dense text. We're used to reading maybe listicles online, or just magazines and things like that. That's normal. people don't read as much as they used to anymore with the web and everything, but
Yeah.
it's really important. And these passages are written to be complex and confusing. And so if you can just drill and train yourself to read faster, that'll make a big difference for you.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I've tried that. I've tried to use The Economist.
Nice.
Yeah. Those bought some magazines, and I'm like, man, oh my goodness.
That's great. You could also take The Economist and you could take that and copy paste it into this site also and drill yourself with that. It's one thing to just kind of read it passively, but to have it displayed at you like you're on a reading treadmill to force you to keep up is really valuable.
Gotcha.
Then to change gears with another reading comp timing thing I would say is the students who do the best on reading comp, they mark very little or not at all. It takes time to write down notes. It takes time to read things. And so highlighting, underlining, circling, I think all of it's just pretty much a big waste of time, honestly. If you want to jot down a couple of quick little summaries for each paragraph, that's great, but I wouldn't do more than that.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. And why is that?
Well, it takes time. You have 8:45 on average per passage. And so if you spend more than 3 minutes on your initial read of the passage plus note-taking, that leaves you only 5:45 to do approximately 7 questions. So you're already less than a minute per question. I mean, the question is, how much lower do you want to go? Do you want to have 20 seconds, 25 seconds? Like it becomes just unreasonable. And so if you can at least have close to a minute per question, that puts you in a much better position. And note taking, it takes time. And then I know you're taking June, which is actually the last full-on paper pencil LSAT. As you may know, starting this summer, it's going to transition towards digital. And then drawing freehand and taking notes on the page won't even be an option anymore.
Yeah. Ooh, that's wild. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's the first time I've heard that too, is that you should not write like in the margins and things like that. But it makes so much sense, I'm like, I'm over here writing this note. I'm taking like 30 seconds to write this note and trying to summarize what I just read. Like, it's taking a lot of time.
It does take time. And I mean, everybody's different. Reading comp is more personal than any other section. So if you wanted to jot a little something in the margin, maybe you could try things out, see what works for you. But in my experience, the students who do the best, they're marking very minimally or not even at all.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, and so I know reading comp is said to be one of the most, difficult subjects. But which subjects do you think are the most difficult?
I think reading comp is the most difficult to improve on significantly. And that's because you've been reading for your entire life. Habits are ingrained. If you didn't read a lot in your previous 20 or 30 something years, however old the student is, then you can't suddenly change that overnight. On the other hand, games are totally unfamiliar at first to everybody. And so anything you learn about games is going to give you an instant boost. So I think games is the hardest at first for people because it's so unfamiliar, but it is the most learnable.
Yeah. See, then what was wild about my test was like, games are my favorite thing. Like, I love games. They're like, it's just, I don't know, I guess because it's like pure, you know what I mean? Like, it's not anything to be assumed. It's like they give you what they give you and you make of it what, you make of it. And so, but then when I got into like the testing center, I don't know. It just kind of, I guess, froze up. I don't know. It was just a wild time, but we're going to practice so that doesn't happen again.
Definitely. And the other thing, I just want to comment on that, on the test day freezing up, having issues on test day. That is a big thing. And there's two parts to that. One is properly simulating test day conditions. So 5 sections, not for strictly timing yourself, taking tests in distracting environments. Then the other is dealing with the nerves and anxiety. And that's where things like mindfulness, meditation, breathing exercises can come in. And it really does make an enormous difference.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, for sure. All right. Yeah, so that's definitely one of my points as well. Just like how to get yourself together on the day of. So I'm just gonna keep that right there for sure. And I just have this question because I've heard recently that people have taken like multiple attempts to get the grade they want. What's the largest amount of attempts that you've heard of someone taking the LSAT?
That's a great question. I have heard from admission officers of people applying having taken it 10 times or more.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I was talking with a dean of admissions at UCLA yesterday, and he was telling me about that. And then, of course, like that's far too much. That starts to look a little bit shaky. Like maybe you don't know about how to decide whether you're ready to take it or not. But so that you definitely don't want that. I think that as the LSAT is being administered more frequently, and because it used to be only 4 times a year. Now it's going to be 9 or 10 times a year going forward. And
Wow.
that means many more opportunities to take it. So people will take it more. Plus, law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only consider the highest score.
What?
Yeah, is that new to you?
Not what I have. That is not what I have read. That is not what I've been told. Are you serious?
Yeah, there's a lot of mythology around it, so I'm not that surprised to hear you be surprised by it. It's this outdated mythology or outdated information that kind of keeps coming up. It used to be that law schools did average. That was before 2006, when the American Bar Association required law schools to report the average LSAT score of their matriculating students. But that changed in 2006, which is, of course, over 10 years ago now by a long shot. Now, in 2006 going forward, they said they will only require law schools to submit the highest LSAT score of their students. And so that's what they care about for their rankings. And so now law schools only take the highest. So if you got a 150, then a 170, it's like you got a 170.
Some people need to update their books.
I know. It's the most frustrating thing. I'm like having these conversations every day with people, and I'm like, what? And some of the schools don't even change their websites. It's like they want, part of it, I think, is they want to give this appearance of being holistic. Like it sounds more scientific to take the average, but that's not what they're considering. That's not their incentives. Their jobs are based on how their schools do in the rankings. When they're looking at applications, they want to see who's going to boost us up in their rankings. The way to do that is by taking the people with the highest LSATs and the highest GPAs.
Okay, yes, and that also brings me to my next question. Perfect. So speaking of that, I've heard that the median for like the LSAT score is kind of, I guess, dropping. And there's been like a lot of different shifts in the admissions process due to people like not really applying for law school anymore. So what do you know about that?
Yeah, there definitely, I did see some headlines a little while ago about people with 170 plus LSAT scores actually not being as likely to apply because maybe they have other options, and there's obviously a lot of changes in the legal field in terms of employment. So that is changing. I think that it's gotten a little bit less competitive with the drop in the number of applicants. But obviously for the top 14, it's always super competitive. For tier 1, it's always somewhat competitive as well. And there is always a benefit to having a higher LSAT score because it gets you into a better law school, or it gets you more scholarship money. And so I was talking with another student recently, earlier today, who she got a full ride to law school. And it wasn't like a top 14 law school, but still being able to graduate without debt, that opens up opens up far more employment options for you. You don't have to take the big law corporate job when you graduate. You can pursue what you really care about, why you wanted to go to law school in the first place. And so even just a single point more can make the difference, getting into a top 14, getting into a better law school, or getting tens of thousands of dollars in scholarship money. So it's crazy, but it's worth retaking if you think you can do better for that reason, even just by a point or two.
Right. Speaking of a point or two, I read in the book that 1 point or two between two students can be very like definitive of like who gets in. That one solid point. That's crazy.
It is, and the funny thing is that there's a score band or a margin of error with your LSAT score. Like, let's say that you deserved a 160. Let's say that's where you were at. On any given day, you could score 3.5 points higher or 3.5 points lower, just based on randomness, based on what appears on the LSAT that day, or plus like how you're feeling that day, right? So let's say one day you get a 160, next day you get a 164 or a 163. How many more doors would a 164 open up for you than a 160 would?
So true.
So that's why I would say to you, let's say you're taking in June. You mentioned you're taking in June. So you take it in June, let's say you get that 160. You might want to consider taking in July as well, because there's only about 5 weeks between those two test dates. So all you've got to do is stay fresh on the LSAT, maybe take another timed exam a week for the following 5 weeks in between. You then take it in July, maybe you do 3 to 4 points better. If you do, that's awesome. And if you don't, no big deal, because law schools don't average multiple LSAT scores.
That's so wild.
It's crazy. And then for those in the fall, same thing. There's LSATs in September, October, November, all just a month apart from each other. And because they don't average and because the gap between them is so small, it really is easy to retake. And this is something new this year. It used to be LSAT was only 4 times a year, spaced 2 to 3 months apart. It's a lot more to take on a 2 to 3 month retake study plan than for 1 month.
Yeah.
But now it's possible, and I'd recommend it. Why not? Get a better LSAT score, get into a better school, get more money, even just through luck alone. And then obviously if you study, you can do even better.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Let's see. And so, yeah, so what type of prep test not prep test, sorry. What type of test prep would you suggest? That being like books, a class that you can go to, online study prep test tutorials, things like that. Which one would you?
Sure. So, of course, the actual LSAT exams, the official LSAT prep tests are the best books you can get. They're available in books of 10 on Amazon for about $20 each, the vast majority of released exams. There are a number of other LSAT books online that don't use real LSAT questions. They contain fake ones they wrote to avoid licensing fees. The problem is those are unrealistic and contain mistakes. So you want to avoid those. Like if they contain typos or unrealistic, you're really wasting your time and you're beating your head against the wall. No need for that.
Yeah.
So stick with the actual LSAT exams. On top of that, on my site, the LSAT blog, I have guides, checklists, cheat sheets, explanations, full on-demand video courses for every section. I also have a live online LSAT class, and I also have a live in-person class here in New York City I'm teaching. And so there are many options for additional prep. If you're looking for free stuff, my YouTube channel, LSAT Unplugged, has a ton of classes on there. They're just full-on class recordings of like an hour or more. I'm just giving them away, putting them out there for free. And I don't think there's anybody else doing anything out there like that. So that's a great option for folks looking for free prep. I know LSAC is also partnered with the Khan Academy. And so that's another resource for folks that has the benefit of having a ton of practice problems in there. They don't have that many though, so it kind of repeats the same ones again and again. I've heard they're starting to adapt it to the digital LSAT format. So that could be really useful for folks taking the LSAT, this summer, this fall and beyond for additional practice.
That's awesome. Yeah. Definitely everybody watching my channel, definitely going to put his links below so that we can all together, because I'm going to, look through all of his, resources and get these scores up, people, for sure.
I suppose one other thing I should mention is that on the LSAT Unplugged podcast, I'm actually putting all the recordings of these classes on there as well. So if like you're on your commute or you're cooking or whatever, you're sitting in the waiting room somewhere, you can just listen to an hour-long LSAT class totally for free on your phone. So that's something I'm trying to put out there for folks as well. Because, we have only so much time in the day. And so being on the go to be able to learn LSAT at the same time and not have to not to choose between two things, but you could instead do both. That's something I'm trying to make it just easier for folks to study.
Right. More accessible. Yeah, that is awesome. Perfect. And I've been looking for more podcasts to listen to anyway. So that's awesome. And I know a lot of people that I've talked to, this would be very beneficial for, because like they either have children or they have full-time jobs. I have a full-time job. So just being able to squeeze it in, to just get more time on it would be perfect. And speaking of me having a full-time job, I forgot to mention, so just day-to-day study routines, what does that look like for you, or what would you suggest? And then also for people who have odd shifts, I work 10:30 to 9 p.m. every day. Well, 3 days out of the week or 4 days out of the week. So how would you?
That's a great question. So if you're working and that long a shift, what's that, 10.5 hours, right? That's a long time. Yeah. So
it's a long.
I don't think it's that reasonable for you to fit in that much LSAT studying that day. If it's just too much, you might burn out. Anything you do after work, after 9 p.m., after a long day like that is not going to be your best quality studying. And then if you try to wake up early to study in the morning, you're not going to have any time for all your life stuff. So I wouldn't even necessarily try to study that day unless you have a break at work or something like that, or you can listen to the podcast in the car. So as an alternative, on the days you're not studying, that's when you want to fit it in. So it sounds like you have huge chunks of time, like full days with nothing else where you could study, and then other days where you have no time at all. So the days, so you guys just you kind of have to meet yourself where you're at. So on a day that's totally busy, don't even try. On the day that's open, make it then, make hay while the sun shines, right? Something like that. So you have that day, you wake up, maybe you wake up at, 8 o'clock. You have an hour or so to, shower, eat breakfast, maybe exercise. Then 9:30, you study for about 3 hours. Let's say 9 to 12, study for 3 hours straight, with maybe a break or two in the middle, of course. Then 12 p.m., break for lunch for 1 hour, come back 1 to 4 p.m., study another 3 hours. That's it. That's all you need. 5-6 hours is the max you could do of LSAT in a day. If you're doing it properly, if you're really focused and engaged and not on your phone or on the web or whatever, if you focus, that's all you need. Now, for those who are working, let's say you're working more traditional 9 to 5, you could get to the office maybe an hour and a half early, study in a conference room or study at a coffee shop near your office when you're already out of the house, and then during lunch. If you could carve out a half hour, that's great. And then in the evening after work, find again a coffee shop or a conference room, study for another hour or maybe 2 to 3 at most before you go home. Because once you get home, you get into your PJs, you're done. Then it's not happening anymore. Don't even try. So try to study out of the house as much as possible, where you don't have your fridge there. There's no TV. There's no friends or family or anybody else in your relationship. Like, you got to keep those people to the side because they'll just distract you in the end.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Great news. Okay. Learned that I was doing that wrong too. But yeah, that's great. Very insightful. What else was I going to ask? Yeah, but I always study outside the house, because even if it is an open day, I have Thursdays and Fridays off, and I'm like, I still can study here because Netflix is right there, my phone's right here, so I have to get out of here. And it's just good to be outside and, you know, enjoying the sun as well, riding around, getting your spirits up and things like that.
Yeah, sure. One thing I could add is, let's say you have this chunk for 3 hours, right? And like, you have the distractions, they're always tempting you, right? What you could do is you could budget in the distractions and set them off to be at designated times. So there's one technique called the Pomodoro technique, where it helps you kind of study in chunks with breaks built in. So let's say for every half hour, it's 25 minutes of studying, then a 5-minute break. So let's say you want to look at your phone, you want to check Facebook, whatever. You save that for the 5-minute break and only do it then. And then it starts over next 30-minute cycle, 25 studying, 5-minute break. That's when you check things and take your break. But you at least know it's coming up, but you kind of control when it will happen. So it doesn't just kind of extend from 5 minutes to like 30 minutes, and before you know, where'd all the time go?
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I've recommended in my channel as well is the Focus app. And so basically it's just a timer pretty much, and it gives you like chunks of time to study, and then it'll give that 5-minute break. And it can be anywhere from like 30 minutes to 20 minutes. And then after 4 sessions or 4 rounds of that, it'll give you a long 25-minute break. So that's really awesome.
That's great. Yeah, they're basically doing Pomodoro there. That's exactly what Pomodoro is. Perfect. So yeah, Focus app is a great way to kind of have it automated.
Yep, and also it'll tell you like when you're not doing anything, like you're just watching TV, you're like, all right, let's go get some work done. So yeah, it keeps you accountable as well. So that's also a good thing to get, is the Focus app. So that's pretty much all I have about the LSAT, and just like, oh wait, that's not true. The day of, how do you prepare for the day of? I know for me, this last time, what I did was I booked a hotel room, just kind of kicked back, relaxed a little bit. You know, I still would have my study materials, but whatever. And kind of just hung out with myself, ordered myself a pizza, just watched some Impractical Jokers. It was just a good time. So that was that. And then the next morning, woke up, got everything ready, and then went on my way. So, but what would you suggest as far as, you know, just the day before prep and then the day of?
That sounds like solid. That sounds like a perfect day before prep. Like, basically rest, relax, take it easy, no real studying. Like, you want to just kind of veg out for a bit, because you've been studying a lot already, and this is not an exam that you can cram for. So day before, either you know it or you don't. So just leave it as what it is, take it easy, so you can walk in like fresh and rejuvenated for the actual day of. Day of, you might want to have a few practice problems with you as a warm-up to do right before you walk in, so that the first test problems you're doing on test day are not the actual score ones that matter. So you could maybe photocopy a logic game or a few logical reasoning questions or whatever, things you've done before, things that aren't too difficult, just to kind of get your mind warmed up for the exam itself. And then, of course, you toss those before you walk into the test center itself.
Yeah.
You might also, in the days leading up, you want to also have your gallon-sized Ziploc packed and ready to go. You don't want to be doing that the morning of. You want to have it at the very least the day before, with like granola bars, like water bottle, banana, energy drink, whatever. Have all of that set, and your admission ticket, your photo, all of that ready and set. And then, of course, you want to know where the test center is, how to get there. Ideally, you're not traveling too far for it. So you mentioned a hotel room. If your test center is too far away, get a hotel room near the test center so that you're not commuting for 4 hours or taking a flight that day. You know, you want to have that set out and clear. And then, of course, you want to have backup. So let's say if your car is going to break down, is there somebody you could call to drive you, or do you have the phone number of a taxi?
Right.
Also know that you can't bring your phone with you to the test center, and so you want to have like a quarter for a pay phone, or to borrow the proctor's phone or something if you need that logistically to get somewhere. Obviously, we all love to use like Ubers and things like that, but people did survive before this, so you got to find a way somehow.
Exactly. Okay. Perfect. Sounds good. I don't know if there's any like sort of like, should you like eat healthy the day before, drink a lot of water, or I mean, I had a friend text me, "Stay hydrated." I'm like, what? Like, but I mean, is it important? Like,
well, you should definitely eat healthy. I mean, if you eat like, if you I wouldn't have a big night out of partying with drinking or like fried pizza or something the night before, because then you might not sleep too well. But so you want to eat healthy in general. You know, you get out what you put in. So like, you want like protein. You want eggs, fish, meat, chicken, like nothing too taxing on the body, but you do want some protein. I'd say protein's pretty important. Don't eat anything too heavy the night before. In terms, I would eat pretty light the morning of, just so that you're not in a food coma. But you also don't want to be hungry, so that's why I think energy bars could be a good option. As far as staying hydrated is concerned, I wouldn't drink too much water, or you'll have to go to the bathroom. Yeah, you definitely don't want to, because the clock is still ticking during the LSAT if you have to go to the bathroom. And then coffee. If you normally drink coffee, I would continue to do so you don't get a headache. But I also consider that coffee is a diuretic. So don't drink too much, or that'll make you have to go to the bathroom, which of course takes time and is not desirable. So don't do anything new. I would say, like I mentioned, take 10 timed practice tests before test day. During those 10 timed exams, try to simulate test day as closely as possible. And so whatever you would eat, whatever you would drink, if you normally have coffee, do that in the practice test and do that on day of. Always kind of maintain a steady rhythm and routine so that test day, if that's exam number 11, it'll be just like another one in a long series, and it's not like the first time of something new and scary.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. That makes sense. All right.
Another thing I could mention about test centers is, if you can, try to go to your test center and try to, if you can, take a practice test at your test center. Obviously, it's not always possible based on the security of the environment wherever they're doing it. But if you can at least go into the room and get a look at what it looks like, I think that'll help a lot to reduce the anxiety as well.
Yeah, for sure. I went to the campus of where my test was taken or whatever, but I don't think they allowed us to go in the room. But whatever.
It's not always possible. But even if you could take it in some kind of similar room, so if it's in a classroom at a high school or a college, if you can find a different high school or a different college and you can take a test on the desk there versus your comfortable, spacious desk at home, it'll be a big difference.
Yeah, I did go to their library, and I like got one of their little cubicles and took some practice tests there. So that was cool. Yeah. So okay, so now since we've tackled from start to finish of the LSAT, to the whole admissions process. First question I want to ask, because I've heard a lot of debate and going back and forth about whether you should take a year off or not take a year off. So what do you think about that?
I don't think there's a hard and fast rule on this as for a right or wrong way to go about it. I think there are benefits to either way. If you go directly from undergrad, the nice thing is that you're still in academic mode. And so studying might come a bit easier to you. Reading things like the LSAT, reading comp passages, or of course law school texts will be easier if you're still in that rhythm. Once you're already out of school for a couple of years, if you have a family or you're working, it's hard to find the time to study. And then your study skills get a little bit rusty sometimes. On the flip side, law schools do like to see work experience. And if your undergraduate GPA is low, having a bit of distance between undergrad and when you apply can make the GPA weigh a little bit less heavily in admissions, and it'll be balanced out by your work experience. So there's pros and cons to each. I wouldn't decide on this based on how admissions might look at it. Just do what makes sense for your situation.
Gotcha. Yeah. Makes sense. Okay. So we already talked about the medians, which was on my admissions list here. But yeah, so as far as admissions counselors and admissions people, like what exactly are they looking for? Because sometimes I hear that they're looking... Well, most of the time I hear that they're looking for people that will do well in the classroom, study well, be a great student, but also want to be adventurous and are curious about the world and like have a lot of extracurricular activities as well. So what are they looking for? What do they want?
That's a great question. I actually wouldn't necessarily agree with all of the things that you mentioned. I think first and foremost, it is a numbers-driven process, much more so than undergrad. Undergrad, like your college essay and your extracurriculars in high school and those things and rec letters, those matter a lot for applying to undergrad. And SAT or GPA don't matter as much, although of course they're important too. Things are kind of more evened out there. For law school, it's LSAT, then GPA, then everything else. So it could be like LSAT is 50, GPA is 30, everything else is 20. Or it could be 40, 20, 40 again. Maybe. It varies. But it's numbers first, then everything else. As for the other stuff, that's the soft factors like personal statement, letters of rec, optional essays and such, those matter. They are important, but not nearly as important. As for what you want to indicate there, you want to show that you're mature, that you've fully considered what the investment of law school is, and that you have valid, solid, well thought out reasons for why you want to go to law school. So you don't want to mention To Kill a Mockingbird. You don't want to mention TV shows or movies. Those are all just media portrayals, and they're glamorous and inspiring, but they don't really reflect what lawyers actually do, which is lots of paperwork, and a small percentage of them actually go into courtroom battles. Most things happen, for criminal, it's usually plea bargaining. For civil, it could be some sort of negotiated agreement anyway. So most things don't go to trial. So trial is not really what people will actually do most of the time, even though it's what you see in the media. And so showing that you have real world exposure to the law is enormously useful. So if you're a paralegal, that helps. If you've had some interaction with the law in some other way, like you were involved in a lawsuit, you could talk about that. You want to be careful about how personal you get. You don't want to have a sob story or anything like that.
Right.
But there are correct, or at least good ways to go about this. And if you don't have any real world exposure to the law, that's okay too. But you want to at least show that you've investigated a little bit. Maybe you've talked to some lawyers would be a good thing to do.
Gotcha. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. Well, excuse me. I interned at a municipal court once, at a common pleas court under a magistrate. I mean, is that the type of thing they're looking for, internships and just like, even if it's small experience, just filing papers and observing, does that still count as like,
Yeah, I think that's great to show. They'll certainly be happy to see that, and I would include that somewhere. You can include it for your personal statement, or you could simply include it on your resume.
Okay, gotcha. All right, perfect. Okay, and so as far as your essay, in this personal statement, what are some do's and don'ts and like some must-haves?
So do's is definitely proofread. I was talking to the UCLA law admission dean yesterday, and he was saying that the biggest mistake he sees is people not proofreading enough. So there's a classic mistake of mentioning one law school and another school's personal statement. Big no. You want to show that you're careful and diligent. Lawyers should be diligent and double and triple check things. And for something as important as a personal statement, you should look it over like 10 times and have other people read it too. So no careless errors. Triple check everything. Grammar, punctuation are important. Misspellings and typos, you definitely want to avoid those. You don't want it to be a laundry list of everything you've ever done. Instead, say that for the resume. So for the personal statement, you want to pick one or two big things and highlight them. And if it's more than one thing, see how they try to tie them together somehow so there's a clear, coherent narrative structure to it. So if you were talking about your internship, was your internship recent?
Yep, last year.
Nice. So that could make for a great personal statement topic. So you could start with an anecdote about what you did at the internship, and then zoom out from there for like lessons learned, general principles you got out of that, and then how that shapes your desire to go to law school if it does.
Gotcha. Sounds great. All right. And then, so you mentioned that one don't was just like, don't have like errors in there, or one do was proofreading.
Yeah, proofreading.
So what's one thing that you like that people would not want to see? Like, just don't put this in your personal statement at all.
They don't want to see it written like it's a contract. Like, don't try to mimic legalese. Like, you haven't gone to law school yet. You're not fooling anybody. Don't try to copy paste some template of a contract online, anything, or like a law. Nothing like that. Like, people try to get really creative and clever with it, but don't stick to like a normal, somewhat of a normal structure.
Okay, gotcha. Sounds great. Okay. I also heard that like some people try to like put in there like like you said, a sob story and things like that, or just like tell too much about their life. But you said not to make it too personal. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
You want it to be personal is okay, but sob story is not okay. So you want to have, and you also don't want to be negative the entire time, right? People do like positive things. You want to end on a positive note in some way. So if you experienced a hardship, you could talk about the hardship you experienced, what you got out of it, how you grew from the experience, and how that might inform your decision to go to law school.
Gotcha. Okay. Sounds great. All right. And okay, now as far as letters of recommendation, so basically, who should we choose and why to be our recommender?
I would say choose a professor and an employer.
Okay.
So if you're going to have only two, one professor, and then if you're out of school, then one employer as well, or even if not out of school, maybe an internship or an extracurricular could be good. And if you're going to have three, then you could have two professors, one employer, or two employers, one professor. That could be fine. I think 2 or 3 is typically pretty standard. And of course, request those early and request them from people who actually know you.
Right. Gotcha. They have seen your work and stuff like that.
Exactly. So not like your cousin's friend is a judge. Like that's not going to fly. It's got to be someone who's really had real world exposure to you, and ideally they supervised you in some way. So if they're a professor, they graded your papers or exams. If they're an employer, they evaluated your work. Not somebody who you've met once at a cocktail party, or even met with like for a half hour at a coffee shop. That's not enough.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect. So I'm almost wrapping up here. I got a couple more questions left. And then let's see. So when you've, done all that you can and you got all your stuff in, how do you maintain how do you stay calm while you're waiting, for the results of the whole shebang?
Yeah, sure. So while you're waiting, I'll answer this in a way you may not have expected at first. While you're waiting for your LSAT scores, you have about 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, you might stress about your LSAT scores. During that time, you can focus on your application. You can work on direct letters, the personal statement and such while you're waiting for the score to come back because you got some time. That could keep you busy. But once you submit your applications and you're waiting to hear back from law schools, that could take months. That could take 5 months, 6 months, or longer. Law schools waitlist people more than ever before because they want to see who else is going to come along. And so during that time, I know it's hard. Just try not to think about it. Get busy with something else. If you're probably working or in school, so just devote yourself fully to that, honestly.
Okay, gotcha. So how late, close to the start date of, next year, how late can they make you wait? Up until the day that they start classes, or how long
They could make you wait until even as soon as a few weeks before it starts. That does happen. People get offers in July, even potentially later than that. It's crazy that happens because you could totally change where you're going to live you could move across the country last minute for law school, right? That could totally change the trajectory of your life. So it is crazy that they can make you wait that long. More typically, folks will hear back in the spring or March, April, May, typically April or May. That's typically when you'll have heard, but you might still have 1 or 2 schools. I heard from a student recently who's still hearing back from places, and he's still waitlisted at Harvard, still waiting to hear back. And it's already, we're now in April. So it could take longer. So look at the offers you do have from schools. And then, of course, you could start the negotiation process for scholarships at the same time. Once you've heard back from a couple, you could then go to others.
Gotcha. All right. Sounds good. And then, let's see, after you got your acceptance and everything like that, this is my last question, actually. I do believe. Yes. So what do you suggest people do with that free time?
Once you've gotten your letters and you let's say you know where you're going.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a couple of opinions on this, and it's kind of based on what you need. You could take that time to relax. This will be your last free summer probably forever in life. So make the most of it. Travel, spend time with family, whatever is important to you, do that. Mm-hmm. There are some people who are gunners, type A's, who want to get the jump on law school. And so there are plenty of different law school prep courses out there. There are also some great books. The one great book I could recommend is Getting to Maybe. It's by 2 law professors. It's highly recommended. Go on Amazon, you'll see all the reviews. That's kind of a classic book for law school prep, law school exam prep. So I definitely recommend checking that out. And then there are a few courses as well. I could send you some links to those if you want to check them out. There's some great ones. I'll mention a few for those who are curious. There's Law Preview. There's Law School Toolbox. There's KT Cools. There are a number out there, and they're all excellent. I would recommend any of them and feel comfortable doing so. And they're all online too, so you can kind of do it anytime, anywhere.
Perfect. That's awesome. Okay, well that pretty much sums up what I have for you today. I truly appreciate all this advice. All my viewers and myself are going to take heed to every word. And thank you for bearing with me while I'm under the weather. And that's for y'all too, my viewers and everything, and your viewers as well. But yeah, just thanks so much, and I'll be sure to post your link and everything like that in my bio. and the description, so that we can just get the help we need. And you're appreciated. We appreciate you. Thanks for all you do.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, definitely. And please feel free to reach out as you prep for the LSAT if you have any further follow-up questions. I'm happy to help however I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, this is your ordinary Jace and Steve signing off. And thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it and got exactly what you needed today. Have a wonderful day. And yeah, that's everything. See you.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.